Tonight, how easy is it to steal your credit card details?
Is that your supposedly secret password?
Yes.
Does that surprise you?
It scares me.
How well are the police tackling it?
I shouldn't be the detective, you know. This is your job.
How does it feel to be scammed?
Within a day of this happening, my mood just plummeted.
And how likely are you to get justice?
There is no one looking after this. We have a big gap in our regulations.
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. Scamming is now the most prolific crime in Britain. Millions of us are potential sitting ducks for the fraudsters, with life-changing sums of money being stolen as the tricks of the trade get ever more sophisticated. But are the authorities doing enough to protect us? Adam Shaw investigates.
Police move in to break up an international gang of scammers. The fraudsters have stolen £16 million over 3 years. Alongside them, a Barclays bank manager is arrested. His part in the gang? Opening fake bank accounts for them to launder the stolen money.
Having a person on the inside is almost the holy grail for organised criminals, so it's something they will try in many institutions. It's something that we see as increasingly prevalent. If you try and rob a bank with a shotgun, you are going to get caught and you're probably going to go to prison for quite a long time. The perception for criminals is that you can steal money in this way and that you won't be caught.
The gang stole tens of thousands from each of their victims, using malware to take over people's computers and raid their banks. Then bank manager Nilesh Sheth's rogue accounts shifted the money out of reach.
I think sometimes because there's no gun involved, no balaclava, there's an assumption that it's victimless.
Absolutely not. If the money goes into the criminal's hands, then someone has lost that money. In some cases it's the bank, but in many cases it's the victim that can't get that money back.
Sheth got 4 years jail. But many of these types of crimes go completely unpunished. It's reckoned that only 20% of victims report to the police they've been scammed at all. And at a time when attempts to steal our data are reaching epidemic proportions, most of the scams that are reported remain unsolved.
I'm on my way to meet someone whose personal bank details we found online. Now, normally you'd have to go onto the dark web to buy a stolen ID, but these we found easily, free of charge, and we found them on a mobile phone app. And I think this is his address.
The phone app is called Telegram. It boasts chat rooms where you can seek information on all kinds of things, some of them illegal, though it's not the only social media platform that can be easily abused by criminals.
So thanks for seeing me, Melvin.
That's okay.
I want to show you this. These are your details I found online. First of all, it's Melvin Barrett with an I.
Yes.
That's your date of birth. You're going to be 63 next birthday?
Yes.
That's the credit card you've got?
Yep.
That's the account number? Is this the number on the back of the card?
Yes.
Is that your supposedly secret personal password?
Yes.
That's the right one?
Yes.
And that is your PIN?
Secret PIN, yes.
I'm
just a bit weary what's going on here, but here we go.
Well, all of those details I found online really easily. How does that make you feel?
Scared. Very scared.
Melvin's details had been given out for free by a hacker as a promotional offer to encourage scammers to buy more IDs. Fortunately, Melvin's credit card provider spotted a scam transaction and moved quickly to freeze his account. How close to being scammed do you think you were?
Very close. If that can happen to me, it can happen to anybody.
Millions of attempts are made every year to steal our personal data. Once stolen, that data can now be easily accessed by anyone. And the fact you no longer have to go on the dark web for the information perhaps marks a dangerous new phase.
The kind of in clear sight way now that cybercrime is conducted, whether it's across social media platforms or on the clear web itself, that looks like it's just something that's going to continue to grow.
The scammers should not be underestimated. Across the UK, they're making more than 20 million a week from bank scams alone.
Hello, hi, how you doing? I want to make a payment, please.
The voice of a scammer.
9,200, please.
Okay, so I'm taking 9,200 from your account.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. That should be done now.
Can I get an up-to-date balance, please?
Yeah, it's £15,639 and 6 pence.
Right, okay. I'd like to make a second payment, please.
No problem.
Articulate, friendly, unbelievably brazen.
So I'm going to take out £6,039 and 6 pence, yeah?
That's correct, yes.
While clearing out this man, Gulberg Sidhu's account of £44,000 in 10 transactions, all to the same payee.
Yep, your V balance is zero now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Does anybody stop and think, hold on a second, this guy had £44,000 in his account 10 minutes ago, and now it's gone to zero?
Gulberg admits he was taken in too. The scammer rang him posing as his bank. Gulberg was convinced enough to give away 2 codes which helped the scammer set himself up as a new payee on his account. But he has no idea how they got his mobile phone number, his account number, his security details, or his date of birth.
I'm very aware of security, I'm very aware of privacy. There is absolutely no way that I would give somebody who I've never heard of my security details.
Gulberg's bank, Metro Bank, had managed to recover £14,000, which was returned to him. But the bank rejected his plea for a full refund. It claimed he must have somehow given away his data. So the £30,000 the fraudster had got away with would have to be Gulberg's loss.
We were going to spend some time with grandchildren, Christmas was coming up, and instead it just turned into what is a hell. We've lost our savings. Our money's gone.
It's said that profits from scams are ploughed back into organised crime, drug smuggling and terrorism, which is one very good reason the authorities need to remain vigilant. But are they doing a good enough job to protect consumers?
It's a huge issue that's not just the challenge for the banks to try and fix. It's a challenge for police, for government, for trading standards. It's kind of like catching smoke, and unfortunately, they're losing the war at the moment.
Aggie Gamsky runs a family construction firm with her husband and his brother in South London. After a sophisticated email hack, Aggie was tricked into paying a bill into a scammer's account at Metro Bank. The money was meant to be going into one of Aggie's suppliers' accounts.
£73,000 went to the fraudster, and days later I discovered my supplier didn't get the money, but the fraudster did. And this is where hell started. You know, neither my bank nor the receiving bank really wanted to help me because the money was already gone. It was just a nightmare.
The name of their supplier was clearly stated on the transaction. It was a roofer they used. But the money actually went into an account supposedly belonging to a Bangladeshi student whose visa had expired, which later turned out to have been faked.
I was absolutely shocked. Somebody who is a foreigner on an expired visa gets £73,000. I mean, why do we have money laundering regulations in the first place?
If a banking system flags up a suspicious transaction, it can freeze an account and investigate. But it didn't, because banks don't routinely check that the name of the payee corresponds to the right account.
Most people still do not realise that they can set up a payee name of Mickey Mouse, and then if the sort code and the account number actually links to an account named Donald Duck, the bank will not notice that. It is a serious failure on the part of the whole of the banking system.
And what about the police?
Not only I waited 6 months to hear from the police, just to hear whether my case was investigated or not. Initially, they said we had to close the investigation because the account was open with false details. I basically wrote a massive letter to them with all the information, point by point. They came back to me quite quickly and they said, oh, OK, that we understand now what happened, and you gave us so much more information so we can investigate. But I thought, you know, I shouldn't be the detective, you know, this is your job.
The Metropolitan Police told Tonight that any fraud can be long and complex and that this investigation was still ongoing. Metro Bank says it won't discuss the case because of legal action Aggie is taking to recover the money. It adds,
"We take security extremely seriously and have a range of safeguards in place which we constantly review and update."
The police are struggling to contain fraud. 9 out of 10 cases that get sent into action fraud, which is the consumer-facing reporting tool when you've been defrauded, go unsolved. The vast majority don't get solved at all when they are eventually passed on to the police. And clearly, budget cuts, reduced forces, reduced resources are leaving police struggling with this type of fraud, which is bigger than burglary now. You know, it's bigger than violent crime, which is a priority for police forces, but fraud isn't at the moment.
Action Fraud told this programme,
"Globalisation and continued changes in technology mean that fraud and cybercrime are increasing significantly. We cannot arrest our way out of this crime. Disruption forms an important part of the police response to fraud, alongside warnings and education."
And what of the internet giants whose global reach inadvertently helps facilitate the cyber villains and keeps them out of the clutches of the authorities? Facebook is making changes. It plans to introduce a single scam adverts alert button to warn its users, but only in the UK, and only after the intervention of money-saving expert Martin Lewis. Scammers have been using his face to advertise fake get-rich-quick schemes on Facebook.
The last couple of years that this has been going on, it's quite devastating every time I see a new one. And I've heard some just heartbreaking stories. A grandmother who I believe her grandchildren had lost their parents and she was looking after them, and she put that money into one of these scams because she trusted Martin Lewis. That's what she said. I'm not going to cry now, but I did cry the first time I heard that. When someone is scammed, it can destroy their life. Not just because they've lost money and lost their retirement and lost their safety net. When they realise that they've been scammed and tricked and they wish they could go back in time and they want to beat themselves up about it. It has a devastating impact on people's mental health.
He reckons that tricksters have used his image to reap up to £50 million profit in the last 2 years alone.
When I see these adverts, I initially try to report them to the police, but I haven't been defrauded because I, of course, haven't put money into them, so I can't call the police. There is no one looking after this. We have a big gap in our regulations. And that was one of the reasons I had said enough was enough, and having tried for a year to get Facebook to listen, I decided to take them to court.
Now Facebook has settled out of court. They've promised to introduce the scam advert button and to donate £3 million to charity. But what of the fraudsters operating on the websites of some other household names?
There's one, for instance, you've flagged up. You think that's potentially a scam?
Well, it is a scam. This vehicle should be £15,000. It's £7,000.
Right.
This is Jack Warwick, alias Jack Buster, who runs a band of volunteer fraud hunters tracking down the online criminals. They focus on car scammers on eBay and Gumtree.
That photograph, we see it every day. If we were to go back, for example, to February, so a few weeks ago, this time the seller is a different person. In fact, it's changed from a man to a woman. You'll see a picture of the same vehicle.
Same picture.
It's gone from Birmingham to Stamford Bridge in North Yorkshire.
Right.
This could easily be on Gumtree maybe 20 times over the last 3 weeks.
So the scammer has actually taken the same photo and is creating multiple personalities to try and entice victims in.
Yes.
Jack's got a team of 6,000 volunteers scouring eBay and Gumtree for scammers.
The sheer volume of scam listings has gone through the roof in the last year or two. You know, when I first started out 6 years ago, I would find perhaps 30 individual listings of scam vehicles. It's now often about 20,000 a day. The simple message is always been the same. Never pay for a vehicle until you've seen and touched it. If you stick to that rule, then fraud numbers would take a big dive.
A spokesman said,
both eBay and Gumtree are doing a huge amount and are investing significantly in tackling criminal activity, working closely with the police and other law enforcement agencies.
Jack's volunteers also pose as genuine buyers to find the account details of the scammers, then pass details of the alleged scam accounts onto the banks concerned. It's hoped the banks will then quickly freeze the potentially rogue accounts. But it doesn't always work that way. Danveer Bilku was a victim of such a scam after he saw a car he wanted advertised on eBay.
I contacted the car dealership via eBay to ask them for some more information on the car. Somebody from the car dealership contacted me back via email and said to me he was selling it on behalf of his brother that had passed away and that he didn't want the sale to go through his company because it was a personal sale.
Little did Danveer know that the dealership website details had been cloned. Danveer lost £6,500.
I was very, happy-go-lucky guy, very smiley, very outgoing. But within a day of this happening, my mood just plummeted completely, to be honest. I turned into a completely different person. I wasn't sleeping properly, I wasn't talking to my friends, I wasn't eating properly.
Then he thought his luck had changed. Jack told him that he'd reported the scam account to HSBC before Danveer had transferred the money over. HSBC had known about the scam account for nearly 2 days. Surely, as they had acted so slowly, they'd be obliged to pay Danveer back.
It just made me extremely angry with HSBC because, they were fully aware that this account was a fraudulent account, but yet they still carried on to allow money to keep going into it.
And Danveer is one of 7 scam victims this programme knows about who claim to have had exactly the same issue with HSBC. Unbeknown to them, they each paid money into a scammer's account that Jack had already warned the bank about. Some £45,000 was stolen from the victims. A bank spokesman said,
each case is different and considered on its individual circumstances. Where a report of a potentially fraudulent payment or scam is received, we take appropriate and timely action. In Mr. Bilku's case, the payment had been withdrawn before we were officially notified by Mr. Bilku's bank. As a result, we are not in a position to reimburse him.
One outspoken critic believes that problems date back more than a decade to the introduction of the faster payment system, which allows money transfers to happen almost immediately.
I believe that the banks have a responsibility to act fairly and properly. There is a risk that if the banks do not address this issue properly, there could be another PPI.
He reckons the banks should have introduced a proof of payee scheme when they brought in the faster payment system in 2008. That would only allow a bank transfer to proceed if the name of the payee tallied with the name on the account. It would have saved Aggie £73,000. And Richard would like bank customers to be able to opt for a 24-hour delay on paying new payees, called an authorised payment delay.
If they had put those technologies in place, which were perfectly, technically, regulatorily feasible to put into place 12 years ago, we would not be sitting here facing billion-pound losses from consumers over the last 5 years.
He believes the bank should offer compensation to victims.
£1 billion sounds like a lot of money, but actually to the banks, £1 billion, they'll hardly notice it. They just need to admit that they should take responsibility and do it.
The banks say they will offer confirmation of payee next year. They're also ushering in a new bank code next month, which they say will provide new protection for consumers. But it won't be backdated. And the option of a 24-hour delay on new payee transactions is not possible under current regulations, they say. And here is one man who has received compensation. Remember Goldberg? He has now won his case after an appeal to the Financial Ombudsman. Metro Bank has confirmed that it will refund his £30,000. Whatever way you look at it, the public desperately need better protection. Critics say the banks need to be better regulated, the police are seriously under-resourced, and the internet giants need bringing into line. Do you think it's a failure of government, then?
I would have to say that I think it is, I'm afraid. There's all the right sounds are being made, but I rather fear that it's, you know, a case of full of sound and fury, but signifying not very much. And the result is that at a time when cybercrime is expanding, is taking on new forms, is entering its like mature phase, we are less prepared than we were, I would argue, 5 years ago to deal with it.
A Home Office spokesperson told this programme,
"We are working with industry, law enforcement and regulators to reduce the number of fraud victims and to ensure they get support and advice on practical steps they can take to protect themselves."
And if improvements are not made, it's inevitable that more people will suffer the fate of 80-year-old Terry and 77-year-old Glyn Donnellan. They sold this Spanish apartment to build up a nest egg of £200,000. Now, it's all gone. Glyn, a retired NHS nurse, and electrician Terry were duped by cold-calling salesmen with high-risk investment schemes and what's called recovery room scammers who were full of false promises to help get their money back.
But you feel quite desolate, really. You know, you feel, oh my God, we've lost all that money and nobody can help us. A lot of people will probably think we're stupid then. But you have to walk a mile in someone's shoes. You're dealing with very, very clever people, and they have an answer for everything.
They had planned to help pay their grandchildren through university and do a bit of travelling.
But I would love to have seen a brother of mine in New Zealand.
I think it's difficult for people of our age group to fit in this world because we're from a more honest, you know, a gentleman's handshake. That meant that's a deal, and it was for real. But now it's difficult to know who you can trust, who you can't trust. And when the phone rings, we look at the number, and if we don't recognise it, we just simply don't answer it.
A ban on pension cold calling came into force earlier this year, but not for the kind of investment advice that Terry and Glyn were targeted with. Of course, fraudsters would anyhow ignore any ban. Vigilance remains the watchword.
If you'd like more information about tonight's programme, just visit our website at itv.com/tonight. Until next time, good evening and thanks for watching.